Hey guys, and welcome to a 7.3 Shadow Priest PvP crash course slash guide, whatever you really want to call it. First of all, forewarning, I'm not a professional Shadow Priest by any means. I am really just, like I play every class, I play Shadow Priest. People like it when I play Shadow Priest. They wanted a guide, so I'm now making a guide about what I usually do in Battlegrounds. And kind of all the spells, talents, rotation, all that. Basically everything you need to know to learn Shadow Priest in like 30 minutes, I'd say, is usually what these videos kind of turn out to be. So, what I usually start out with is if you want to find a better Shadow Priest, literally just find a high-rated Shadow Priest and follow his guide, but here's mine. I'm just a Scrub Lord, kind of just play PvP for fun, do a lot of random battlegrounds, I always get at least 100 million damage on most of my classes or specs, but starting out with Dispel Magic and going over all of our spells. Dispel Magic removes one beneficial magic effect. This is good against a Mage Ice barrier, Blessing of Protection, any Mage barrier, any heal, any Icy Veins, gets rid of the 20% damage buff and the haste increase. Any really good magic beneficial spell that you can dispel, I would suggest dispelling it, because most of the time it reduces the target's burst by a lot. Dispersion. Disperse and appear shadow energy for 6 seconds, reducing all damage you take by 60%, but you're unable to cast. In your artifact weapon, there is something that heals you while you are in dispersion. There it is, 50% of your total max health over its duration, so 60% reduced damage plus 50% of your max health in PvP. Sounds like a good idea to me, sounds like a good bargain. Would suggest using that when you are below 50% health, or when people do pop cooldowns, because sometimes people can even burst through your dispersion, even if you, unless you take wherever it is. There's a talent that, there it is, reduces damage by additional 35%. Usually if you don't take that talent, sometimes people can burst you through dispersion, so I would be cautious of that. If you find that you're doing twos and people are bursting just immediately on you right as your game starts, I would suggest popping dispersion, because you'll still take probably a fourth of your health through dispersion. Levitate makes you float. It's a nice spell. Mass Dispel. This is one of it's like a priest staple ability. Basically, you can remove spells that usually aren't removable. So the main ones are Ice Block and Bubble. Those are really only two ones that come to mind, really. Mind Blast. Blast the target's mind for 290,000 shadow damage. Generates 15 insanity. If you don't know what insanity is, it's our resource. I will go into this when we go into the rotation. Mind Bomb afflicts a target with a Mind Bomb. After 2 seconds or if the target dies, it unleashes a Psychic Explosion, stunning all enemies within 8 yards for the target for 4 seconds. This is our one stun. It does replace Psychic Scream if you do take it. I do like it more than Psychic Scream because it's a stun and not a fear, and most classes can get out of fears fairly easy, and fears do often break from damage most of the time. Mind Control. It's the title says what it does. You just control someone. It's good for arenas if you want to knock someone off the edge or make someone fall down, but other than that, I really don't use it in random battlegrounds. Mind Flay salts a target's mind with shadow energy, causing 243,000 shadow damage over 2.7 seconds and slowing their movement speed by 50%. This is our filler. If you really have nothing else to press, you're going to be pressing this, but I find that I don't really press this all that much in PvP. Mind Vision, I don't even use that, so don't even worry about it. Powered Shield. Shield an ally for 15 seconds, absorbing 270,000 damage and preventing damage from delaying spellcasting. I'll go into this ability later, but it's part of our kind of rotation if you take certain talents. Usually I just try to throw it up whenever it's off cooldown because it's a free absorb for 270,000 damage, and then while that's up you will get healed from your Vampiric Touch, so that's why I do kind of spam it. I don't think I've ever used Purify Disease. I mean, if you're going against Unholy Death Knight, you can dispel their dot, but that's really the only disease that I can think about that does somewhat that does somewhat damage that you'd want to get off of you, but other than that I really don't see a use in it. Shackle Undead. I mean, you could use this against a Unholy Death Knight pet when it does have the Dark Transformation buff up, and it will reduce the damage by a decent amount. So if you're a Shadow Priest, you can try to do that if you want to get the cast off. Damage will break it, so fair warning. Shadow Mend wraps an ally in shadows, which heals for 359,000, but at a price. The ally will take 17,000 damage every 1 second until they have taken 179,000 total damage from all sources or leave combat. It's our heal. Basically, it's our heal. Shadow Word Death. Word of Dark Binding that inflicts 286,000 shadow damage to the target, only usable on enemies that have less than 35% health. This is our Execute. It's an instant cast. It does about 300,000 damage in PvP, and yeah, it does a damage. It's kind of an Execute, but not really. Just kind of an instant Mind Blast whenever someone's below 35% health, and it generates a shit ton of insanity. 30 insanity is about 3/10 of our insanity, so use this whenever you can. It generates a lot of our resource. Shadow Word Pain, a word of darkness that causes 56,000 shadow damage instantly, an additional 557,000 shadow damage over 18 seconds. This is one of our main abilities. The Shadow Priest playstyle is just kind of spreading your dots on everyone, and then once you do have that, you're trying to single target someone down. So this is one of our main abilities. You can apply it by itself, but one of our talents does apply it with Vampiric Touch, which I'll read soon. Shadow Fiend summons a shadowy fiend to attack the target for 30 seconds. I will close that. I'm sorry. Close, exit, yes. Fuck you, TS. Shadow Fiend, it does a decent amount of damage. I'm pretty sure when it hits a target, it hits about for 100,000 in PvP, and it doesn't do much other than that, just kind of extra damage. Shadow Form, it's a priest staple. It's been here since vanilla. Assume a shadow form, increasing your shadow damage dealt by 10% and reducing your physical damage taken by 10%. Just kind of a buff that you keep on. You don't really notice it all that much because you're constantly in it. If you're not in it, you're doing something wrong. Silence. This is a very unique silence, I'd say. It's a blanket. If you know what blanket silence was back in the day, it's when mages had counterspell and it would apply like a 3-second silence that you just wouldn't be able to cast. Blizzard basically took that and gave it to priests and upped the time from 3 seconds to 5. So, silence is a target, preventing them from casting spells for 5 seconds against non-players. Also interrupts spell casting, prevents any spell in that school from being cast for 3 seconds. This is our one interrupt. It does have a fairly short cooldown for a 5-second silence, but it's our one interrupt. I think it's our one interrupt. It's like not that hard to comprehend. Vampiric Embrace fills you with Embrace of Shadow Energy for 15 seconds, causing you to heal a nearby ally for 40% of any single target damage that you deal. This is, I'd say, a good button to press when it's just you around. Sometimes, I'm not sure how it works. If there's allies around you and you're lower than them, I'm pretty like it would be smart for it to heal you over your allies, but I think sometimes it will heal your allies over you. It would be smart if it healed the lowest health person, but it might, I don't know. It doesn't say, so. Anyway, a Vampiric Touch, again, another one of our main abilities. Our main damaging abilities, I should say. Touch of Darkness that causes 896,000 shadow damage over 24 seconds and heals the priest for 50% of the damage dealt. Vampiric Touch is dispelled. The dispeller flees in horror for 3 seconds. Generates 6 insanity. So, this is one of our main spells. I'll get into it more later in the rotation and how it kind of weaves into our rotation. But, going on, Void Eruption releases an explosive blast of pure void energy, activating Void Form, which is something I'll get into later, and causing 117,000 shadow damage to all enemies afflicted by a Shadow Word Pain or Vampiric Touch. During Void Form, this ability is replaced by Void Bolt. Again, I'll get into Void Bolt later. Void Bolt's basically just an instant Mind Blast that refreshes the duration of your dots on someone by, say, 5 seconds? Somewhere around there. Okay. Void Torrent is our artifact ability. Raise your dagger into the sky, channeling a torrent of void energy into the target for 927,000 shadow damage over 4 seconds. Insanity does not drain during this time. I'll get into this more later and how we want to weave it into our rotation, but basically, before Void Form's about to end, you want to use this and then get another Void Bolt off for max burst. That's about it right there. Our Mastery increases the damage of your Shadow Word Pain, Vampiric Touch, and Void Bolt by 53%. In PvP, you don't have to worry about this since we use pre-made stat templates, but in PvE, I don't know what the stat Mastery is, but or what the stat priority is, but I figured Madness is somewhere up there. Mind Seer. When Mind Flay deals damage, if the target is afflicted by a Shadow Word Pain, it deals 39,000 shadow damage to all nearby enemies, generates 1 insanity per hit. This really doesn't happen in PvP all that often. Unless there's a shit ton of people grouped up together, I really don't see much use in this, in using Mind Flay to get this off. Shadowy apparitions. When your Shadow Word Pain damage over time critically strikes, you also create a shadowy version of yourself that floats towards the target and deals 21,000 shadow damage. Doesn't generate insanity, unless you're talented into it, I believe. But that's just extra damage. If you want to, like, it's extra damage, I don't know. For the duration of Void form, your Void Eruption ability is replaced by Void Bolt, and this is Void Bolt. Sends a bolt of pure void energy at the enemy, causing 301,000 shadow damage and extending the duration of Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch on all nearby enemies by 3 seconds, and generates 16 insanity. So you go into Void form, you're going to want to use this as much as possible whenever it's off cooldown, is usually what I try to do. It refreshes the duration of your damage over time effects and does about as much damage as a Mind Blast, which is one of our main kind of damaging spells. So I would use this ability as much as possible in Void form. Now going on to Void form itself, activated by casting Void Eruption, twist your Shadow form in with the powers of the Void, increasing shadow damage you deal by 25%, reducing the cooldown of Mind Blast by 3 seconds, and granting a 1% haste buff every 1 second. And then this happens until your insanity reaches 0, and that's your resource. So that's going over the main abilities of this. I'm going to go into the talents here. Sorry, I didn't even notice that like annoying sound over there was. I don't know how long I was standing there, but sorry about that. Shadow Word Void, I don't think I've seen anyone really use this. If you want to... fuck off, dude. Fuck off, Calic. If you really want to use this, you can. I don't think I've ever used it. I usually like Twist of Fate, because when you apply your dots to everyone, one of them is bound to go below 35% health. And when that does happen, you get a 20% increased damage buff and 20% increased healing buff for 10 seconds. It feels like it doesn't even compare to the other two talents. Mind Flame, Mind Blast deal 10% more damage and generate 20% more insanity. Twist of Fate. Why would you take the other two talents? Level 30 talents, you move 1% faster for every 3 insanity you have. I don't really use this. Body and Soul, Powered Shield increases your target's movement speed by 40% for 3 seconds. I always use this, mainly because I always try to keep up Powered Shield on me most of the time when I'm PvPing, and I'll go into Honor talents when I explain that. When you cast Settlement on yourself, it damages over time effect, heals you instead, and reduces all damage you take by 10%. This could be viable if you do wave Shadow Mend into your rotation, but I find that that would be pretty hard to get off, and if you get interrupted in your Shadow Word Mend, it locks you out of your Shadow Word school, so that's that's like your damage kind of gone for 5 seconds, however long the interrupt lasts for. Mind Bomb, already talked about this. It just stuns someone and replaces your Psychic Scream, 30-second cooldown. Reduces the cooldown of your Psychic Scream by 30 seconds, which turns it into a 30-second cooldown, so it goes from 1 minute to 30 seconds. Usually I just run Mind Bomb because it gives it a 30-second cooldown anyway and turns it into a stun. Dominate Mind, never use this, wouldn't suggest using it, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone use it, so that says enough. When Void form ends, its haste bonus fades by 2% every second, and every second instead of immediately ending. You can use this if you want the haste buff that bad. I don't really use it all that much. I do use Reaper of Souls, however. And Reaper of Souls. Shadow Word Death is now castable on targets below 35% health. So this is up from 20% health to, I believe, 35%, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And always generate insanity as though it killed the target. Basically, what it's saying is you get to use this spell more, and you generate a ton of insanity. Why would you not take this talent? You can use Void Ray. I've used Void Ray a few times, and it's not that bad. Basically makes your Mind Flay and Mind Seer hit harder. 40% harder to be exact. I mean, you can use it. It makes your Mind Flay hit for like 100,000, 99,000 every second, which is... it's definitely not bad. But I just prefer Reaper of Souls more. Now we get on to the more controversial bottom row talents. Sand Lane increases the damage of your Vampiric Embrace, or Vampiric Touch by 20%, so this ability gets buff type 20%. If we go there, it goes from 894,000 to about 1 million. Of course, in PvP, there's going to be stat templates, but there you go. Your Shadowy Apparitions now deal 100% increased damage, which means this would go from 21,000 to 42,000 and generate 3 insanity. So this would be an insanity generating build. However, look at the next talent. Shadow Word Pain periodic damage has a 10% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Mind Blast and cause your next Mind Blast to be instant cast. So what you're telling me is if I have enough targets dotted, I can spam this spell that generates 15 insanity and does 290,000 shadow damage almost all the time. You're goddamn right you can. Now that, I think, is irreplaceable by the other two talents, and that's why I almost always take Shadowy Insight, because in Battlegrounds you kind of have your dots on everyone, and you kind of just generate Mind Blast like all the time, and I kind of press Mind Blast all the time, so use Shadowy Insight in Battlegrounds. In arenas, I'd use Sand Lane, but going on to the 90-row talent, I don't think I've ever used Power Infusion. Seems people can spell steal it, which I don't really understand, so if a mage spell steals this, they get 25% haste. I'd pass on that. But then, next to it, Vampiric Touch also applies Shadow Word Pain to the target. Now hear me out. Let's say you're in a battleground, you're dotting people, so all you have to do is press this one button, and it applies both of your dots, which together do about, let's see, 896,000, let's round that to 900,000, round that to 600,000, 1.5 million damage just from pressing one button. That's why I take Misery. I don't take Mindbender. I've noticed Mindbender does hit slightly lower than Shadow Fiend for some reason, which doesn't really make so much sense to me. But it kind of does at the same time, because then it generates Insanity, and it has a 1-minute cooldown, which means it only has like a 40-second downtime, which I guess makes sense. So out of these 90-row talents, these two I'd say would be interchangeable if you really kind of want to play around with them, but most of the time I'd stick with Misery. Onto the 100 talent. Void Eruption may be cast anytime your Insanity level is at 65 or higher, and Void Form increases damage dealt by an additional 25%. By an additional 5%, my bad. 25% would be crazy. Basically, this makes it so you can Void Eruption when you're at lower Insanity, so usually when you Void Eruption at lower Insanity, your haste is so low that your Insanity isn't running out that fast, so when you're generating Insanity with Void Bolt and Mind Blast and all your dots going up, you kind of go from 65 to 100, and then you just kind of drain down from there. So being able to go into Void Form at a lower Insanity level is definitely probably one of the best things I've ever heard of, and wouldn't suggest taking either of these talents, really. I've tried Shadowy Crash. I mean, I made a video that was really clickbait, and it was like, Shadow Crash is the best. It's definitely not. Basically, you generate Insanity, but it does a decent amount of damage. I'd say 400,000 if people actually stand in it, but the chance of someone actually standing in your Shadow Grass, which takes a while to even come down anyway, is very low. Don't use Surrender to Madness. I've never used. Basically makes it so you can cast while moving, and you generate more Insanity. Then you die horribly. Those are normal talents. Let me go into the honor talents, and these I will discuss kind of. Your honor talents definitely affect how you play this spec more than any other spec that I've really seen. I think the synergy in your Shadow Priest talents and your honor talents are probably the best out of most of the specs in the game, because they can really affect how you play in PvP. Gladiator's Medallion, this is my go-to. I don't think I've ever switched out of it. I use Mind Quickness just for the haste buff. Usually you do get target as a Shadow Priest, because most people have the brain to actually focus Shadow Priest, so that's right there. Void Shield. So now on to here is like more in-depth in explaining why I take certain things, or when you would take certain things. After casting Shadow Word Shield, Power Word Shield on yourself, all damage you deal heals you for 33% of the damage dealt for 5 seconds. Damage dealt by Vampiric Touch is not affected. This makes it so whenever you cast your bubble, which gives you 270,000 absorb, that you get something that changes 33% of your damage dealt into a heal. The way I play Shadow Priest is I dot everyone up, get my dots up on everyone, and then I usually try to weave in Power Word Shield as much as possible to get the damage healing part of this honor talent off. Going on to the next one. Pure Shadow, already talked about this, makes it so your Disperse absorbs an additional 95, goes from 60% damage to 95% damage reduced, and makes it so your Insanity does not drain for an additional 6 seconds after Dispersion. I find most of the time that I like Void Shield because I can control my health and don't have to rely on healers as much. Fleeting Embrace, Vampiric Embrace's cooldown is reduced by 50%. The reason I don't take this is because most of the time I have no clue who Vampiric Embrace is healing, and most of the time it's not you, sadly, so Be nice if Blizzard made it so if you're capped out on health, it would heal someone else, but sadly, Blizzard doesn't think like that, but this would change it from 3-minute cooldown to a 1.5-minute cooldown, so if you find that someone in your RPG or 2v2 or 3v3 kind of gets low, I would use this. Going on to the 4th row. Driven to Madness, while Void Form is not active, being attacked will grant you 9 Insanity over 3 seconds. Haven't used this since I leveled past Dishonored Talent. Void Origins. Void Eruption is now instant cast. This, paired with this, is really nice. I would recommend it. Yeah, increased shadow damage, instant cast, Void Eruption at level 65, more Void Forms, which means more 25% damage increase on most of your spells. I don't know why you wouldn't really take this. Edge and Insanity, I don't think I've ever used it. Void Form is way too powerful to even use that. Mind Trauma. Fully channeled Mind Flays cause you to steal 3% haste from the target for 20 seconds. Only 12% haste can be stolen from a target. Stacks up to 8 times. So you could technically get a shit ton of haste from this. I don't think I've used it though. And I think I've tried using it and it was kind of a hassle, but I'll try it sometime. If you want to test this out and try it yourself, then go for it. I haven't used it enough to really give much insight on it, so caution. That's all I have to say about this one. Having Vampiric Touch on 2 or more targets grants you 4 Insanity every 2 seconds. So this is just like, it's more Insanity for you. Here you go. Here's some more resource for you. Go in Void Form some more. It's basically what that talent's telling you. But then there's Sidekick Link. So you know how I was telling you about how this applies Shadow Word Pain to everyone, and then Shadow Word Pain paired with this heals you, and then this also reduces the cooldown on your Mind Blast to be reset every time your Shadow Word Pain does damage. So this, and this, and this, and this basically makes it so most of your spells are instant cast. You generate a dick ton of Insanity. You have a ton of Mind Blast that you can heal from. And then your Mind Blast and Void Bolt now deal 30% of their damage to all targets afflicted by your Shadow Word Pain within 40 yards. So basically, if you have Vampiric Touch on people, refresh your Shadow Word Pain on people with Void Bolt, and use your Shadowy Insight, get into Void Form, you're still going to be doing a ton of cleave damage. This is usually like my 5th most damaging ability, and this is an honor talent, keep in mind. Not a real talent, just an honor talent, a completely bonus talent that, out of the other 2 options, I think this is way better in braided battlegrounds or normal battlegrounds. And that's usually why I do so much damage, is because Shadow Priests are really good at doing damage to a lot of people. There you go. That's all I'm going to rant about Psychic Link. You'll see in some of my videos that I just always, not complain, but I'm always in like, wow, about Psychic Link damage. Here's the last row. Almost there, and then we'll go into the rotation. This is actually going to be 30 minutes. I think that's the longest guide I've done. Well, alrighty. Fiend summons a Fiend with 10 health for 12 seconds beside you to attack the target at range with Flay. Flay deals 2% of the target's total health and shadow damage every 0.9 seconds, also slows their movement speed by 50% and reduces their healing received by 50%. I use this because it reduces the healing, does percent max health, and usually no one attacks it for some reason, which reasons unknown to me. I don't think they understand how much damage this thing does, so they just kind of leave it alone. I very rarely see anyone attack Fiend. Usually when they do, you know that they have to have a Shadow Priest, because I'd say 9 out of 10 people that I fight don't kill Fiend for some reason, so it's just extra damage, reduced healing, and a slow. Shadow or Death also silences a target for 3 seconds. This would be good with your Reaper of the Souls. Would be good against the healer comp, I'd say. But the healing reduction of this is kind of like, I don't know. It's really up to your personal preference here. And then Void Shift, obviously. You and your currently targeted party or raid members swap health percentages. Increases the lower health percentage of the 2 to 25% if below that amount. This was a thing in Cataclysm or Miss Pandaria, I think. And basically it swaps your health with another person's. It's really good for 2v2. Because you can Void Swap, or Void Shift, jump down, heal yourself to full. Other than that, I don't take it in Battlegrounds or Rated Battlegrounds or anything. You could use it on a flag carrier, but I don't play the objectives, so yeah. Going on to the rotation, the main part of this guide. So the Shadow Priest rotation is like this. It's pretty simple. You can't really... God, I'm trying to swear less, and it's really hard. You can't screw it up that bad, guys. All you do, right? So let's say you're in Warsong Gulch. There's 3 people in front of you. You dot all 3 of them. You... Oh man, that is loud. I am turning that down. Why are you so loud? There we go. We'll turn it down to that. So basically, going over it again, you dot everyone. You dot everyone. You press Vampiric Touch on one of them because it applies your dots. When you have nothing else to press, you press your Mind Play. When you're at 65% insanity, you use Void Form. You use Mind Blast. And when you have nothing else to press, you use your Void Bolt and Mind Play. And then you want to press Void Bolt on cooldown. Preferably, you'd want to target different targets to refresh your dots on them. You want to press your Mind Blast whenever it comes off cooldown. And you just kind of want to keep your dots up like this. Whenever you're close to the end of your Void Form, you're going to want to use your Artifact Weapon, and that's mainly because of the damage increase that you do get from Void Form and the haste buff that you get from the end of Void Form, which makes your Artifact cast time a lot lower than it would be at the beginning of Void Form. So this is basically all you do as a Shadow Priest. You just kind of dot everyone, you press your Mind Blast whenever it lights up, and you keep your dots on people. It ain't the hardest spec in the world. People always ask me why I do so much damage, and that's because this spec is, I'd say, it's fairly easy. It's not that hard. It's pretty hard to do bad on. In PvP, you are going to want to weave in some of your Shadow Word, or Power Word shields and heal. Yeah, Power Word shield. Fuck. Power Word shields in for the healing, or percent healing damage dealt thing, whatever it is from Power Word Shield. This thing right here, you're going to want to use it because it heals you. If you're low on health, you use Vampiric Embrace, it'll heal you, possibly. And don't forget your Mind Bomb whenever you're trying to peel for yourself. Don't forget to disperse when someone tries to burst you. And that's about it. That's Shadow Priest. It ain't the best. You don't really have a burst rotation. I'd assume your burst is just kind of popping Shadow Fiend, and then at the end of your Void Form, you just kind of use this for your burst. And that's like the best bet you kind of got to burst someone down. Yeah, that's Shadow Priest. It ain't that hard. You kind of just dot everyone up, you kind of try to keep your dots on everyone, and you kind of just press Mind Blast whenever you can, and press Power Word Shield. And then you want to press Fiend whenever someone's low and there's a healer on them, or if you're just killing a healer, just feel free to press that button as much as you want, because it just reduces their healing. So, yeah, conclusion. Here's the priority list, guys. You ready for it? Vampiric Touch. Make sure your dots are on people. If Void Eruption can be cast that shit, because it increases your damage by 25% and your haste. Outside of that, you want a Mind Blast and Void Bolt, and then whenever you can Shadow Word Death, I'd suggest using that. Outside of those, you just want a Mind Flay, and then Dispersion whenever someone tries to go on you and pops their burst, and Mind Bomb for a stun, and then weave Power Word Shield in your rotation depending on the amount of health that you're missing, and use Void Torrent at the end of your Void Form. That's all you really got to do. It ain't that hard. I have plenty of videos of me just doing this exactly, where I just dot everyone up, press Mind Blast and Void Eruption and Void Bolt, and it's easily like 150 million damage every battleground, I'd say, if you just kind of don't get focused. Even if you do get focused, it's fairly easy to stay alive with your Void, Vampiric Touch and your heal from Void Shield, and this. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you guys liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what class you guys want a guide for, or what spec you guys want a guide for. Let me know any video suggestions that you guys do have for me. Leave in the comments anything, really. I'll try to reply / read them. And yeah, if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, do whatever you guys really want. I hate all this YouTube stuff, but I feel obligated to say it. Anyway, until next time, guys, I'll see you guys later.